This is the BaconTrading auction profile indicator. Now, really quickly, I'm going to use the standard or the default one. You can get this out of here. It's just called volume profile. This is a free one. Every platform should have a free volume profile. If your platform doesn't, you need a new platform. The values I'm going to be looking at most of the time are going to be the value area high, value area low, and the point of control. So those are the three that I'm going to be looking at. A lot of you are familiar with this. The first thing I wanted to accomplish with this was getting that point of control to move over time instead of just the closing value. You see, that's just the closing value, and I didn't like that. I wanted it to move. So that's the first thing I want you to look at here. The next thing, a little closer here so you can see, there are these little dots. This is how often it updates. So it won't move in between those dots. So that's how often that this indicator is going to update. You might say, well, there's a little dot right here. There's no volume at that price. How did it move? Well, a little square end just was kind of ugly. So it has dots on both sides. Because it matters what it looks like. The next thing you're probably looking at is, what are these green and red markers? Well, this is expansion. And expansion is where the value area is trying to grow, up or down. And it's triggered pretty simply by if it trades above the expansion, it turns on, or below, it turns on. And then if it trades back across the point of control, shuts off. Back across the point of control, right there, shuts off. So it's just, break out to break back over the point of control. That's it. What do I do with expansion? It helps me deal with a concept called scope. Scope is what range we're trading in. So you can see right here, like small range, you start to get expansion, especially here, and you start considering wider ranges. There's some other things you can do with expansion, but for a very general concept, that's basically the way that I'll use it, is to help determine what range we're in or what scope we're on. Now that we've covered the basics, let me show you the settings, and I kind of want to take a look at these settings with you because there's a lot of stuff here. So let's get a look at this period. It's where you want your auction profile to start. You can do regular trading end, regular trading start, or new day. So the trading end will be, if you're on a futures chart, it's going to be 4:15 Eastern time. Using my mouse now, that was terrible. 4:15 Eastern, and that is when futures get halted and brokers distribute their balances. This tends to be the one that I like the most right here. The regular trading start, that is the 9:30 Eastern time when stocks open, or you can do overnight, which is when the date changes. Those are the three options you can go with there. The next one, you can pick what values you want to actually plot on here. Now this is point of control VWAP, and you don't have a VWAP. It's because later on there's actual hard settings for VWAP, and I have it toggled off for this. Value area, point of control. Oh, yeah, that's what I have. The next one, I think this is a little bit more important than you might think. It's just the value area and kind of the way it looks. So we have unconnected versus connected. So if you turn on connected, all these lines will be continuous lines. I think that's a little messy looking, I have all these connected, but maybe you don't. That's okay. So that's that. And then this is shadow and cloud. So you might be saying, what on earth is shadow and cloud? Well, let me show you. The cloud is this, and I call it a cloud because the function is in there is add cloud, like this. So I called it a cloud. Those are all basic. The last one is shadow, and this is one I want to point out and make sure I cover. Is shadow, it looks like this. And you're saying, well, why is it here and not over there? Well, let me explain. I have a reason, I promise. Your brain is really good at taking a light source like the sun, taking an object like this, we'll call it an obelisk. There, it's an obelisk. And looking at the shadow and determining how large that object is based on the shadow. Does that make sense? So right here, this shadow distance tells you about the size of the range. So when this range is small, like this, you get a wider shadow. As the range gets larger, the shadow gets smaller. And we've had some crazy ranges where there's just no shadow at all. So this is not designed for you. This is designed for your brain to automatically get used to something it's already great at calculating it, which is assumptions about sizes based on shadows. So that's what the shadow is. I really like it. I think it's helpful to see. You get this sense of how large the range is pretty quickly, and then you get these times when it just vanishes because ranges are just insanely enormous. So that's the shadow. Let's move on. Now, the next thing to look at is the auction point of control. It says mem. What's mem? Memory. So you can actually pull forward the previous 3 days point of controls. And then so it doesn't rescale your chart like crazy, you can just do nearby. So I'm going to turn that on so we could take a look at that. But I'm not going to load it up until we get through here. So this is the volume weighted average price. It can have an independent period of the auction. So you might want to do the value area off the balance and the VWAP off the regular trading start, and you can totally do that. The next thing is to turn it on, you can roll forward up to two previous VWAPs. I'll roll forward one so you can understand what that concept means. And the colors, you do rise, fall, single, we'll just leave it on rise, fall. All right, so I'm going to load these up. And then while that loads, because Thinkorswim always takes a second to load, when you're looking at the point of controls here, you can pull them forward like this. You see that? And then what happens is that if you do that and then you're like this, zoomed in, right? You're trying to watch this. Well, if they're way up there, your chart's going to rescale and look something like this. And it might be really annoying to have a bunch of point of control values rescaling your chart. So what I did with the word near is it takes a look at where the day opened, and then it decides on a daily ATR distance. It says how close do we have to be to those points of control before you flip them on. And it's got to be about an ATR or two. So once price gets up a little bit closer to here, then it'll flip those on, and then they'll turn on. But they won't turn on because of the scaling problem. I didn't want my charts constantly rescaling. So you could see here that if price, it gets to the new day and the price not close enough, it won't roll it forward because it's just not close enough, and that would be really annoying. Oh, sorry. Yeah, these are the points of control. So there's 3 of them here. You see the smallest one, that means it's 3 days back. The medium, that's 2 days back. And then the longer dash here is 1 day back, or yesterday. So you can see that right there. And so that's what those are. See, it goes from long dash to medium dash to short dash as it gets older. And then they only trigger when they're close. Does that make sense, the points of control? If it doesn't, let me know, ask me questions. This is the VWAP here. See how there's 2 of them? So let me just show you that really quick so you can see somewhere where the market didn't get immediately halted. So right here, you see this VWAP? Instead of it stopping, it just continued to use a volume weighted average price. So this is the times 1 roll. And then a new volume weighted average price started here. Now you might be looking at the coloration and saying to yourself, whoa, those colors don't look like I was expecting. Yeah. So let me just tell you, there's 3 states that it can be in. That's at times. There's 3 states it can be in. State number 1 is the easiest. It's moving down, and the VWAP is under the point of control. So that's great, right? State number 2, it's moving up. See right here? And it's under the point of control. So right there. And state number 3 will be it is above the point of control and moving down. Got that? So on this one, it's a little easier to see. So you have it's moving up, and it's under, so it's this light green. It's moving up, and it's over, so it's that dark green. And then we do, scroll back here, there it is. It's moving down, but it's over the point of control, so it's light green. So there's 3 states that the VWAP can be in, and my attempt was to make it a little bit more resilient, and since this is the auction profile, not the volume weighted average price profile, I thought it was appropriate to color your VWAP based on your point of control. Just some basic things that I had observed that I thought were useful. Maybe you disagree or you think that that's crazy. Let me know. I'm open to discussion about that. That's the one that I thought was the most useful, so I went ahead and put it in there. So let's take a look. Actually, let me turn off the VWAP. So hopefully that the roll forward makes sense, the coloration makes sense. Most of you probably know all about that already. Let's take a look here. Gaps, we have daily and weekly, so you can turn those on, and I will turn them on so you can get an idea what they look like. Let's turn all this on. So we're going to get auction labels, so that's going to put labels up here, and you're going to see the values, so what the value at high, low, point of control. We have chart labels, or sorry, the chart labels are these ones up here. You'll see them show up. The auction labels have to do with this expansion, and we'll get volume. Well, you'll see. So okay, so and we'll do the limits here. All right, let's load that up. Now, while this is loading up, I want to explain a concept that's going to take me a minute, and I'm going to use this to do it. When I see price expand upward like this, I like to find where, let's say it started about right here, if I remember right. Take this, and you'll see something called backfill. What it is right here at the high, so you take all this volume, let's say X amount of volume, right? It's summed it up. And then basically you say if that took time n, or actually no, it's not time n, so this is that amount of volume, then you start subtracting the volume that happens after, and then once you have this amount of volume equal to the amount of volume that traded after this high, it backfilled. So it's sort of like it fills up and then empties out. Does that make sense? You'll see it in just a second here. Let me show you. Let's flip back over. We'll go to that exact spot actually, right there. So you see this? It fills up, and right there, you see this line? It backfilled, and it finished right there, and there's the green dot that sort of, it's small because I don't want to be annoying. And that's where this amount of volume was equal to that amount of volume. Now, you can see right now we actually have that going on. Let me just go like that so you can see it. So it started, see it broke above, so it started the expansion. Here's the current high in that expansion, and the backfill is at 0%, which you probably should never see 0%, but it's probably more like 0.5%. So once that's done, this backfill line will disappear, it'll plot a dot. Now, the reason that I put this in here is because it's just a phenomenon that I observe a lot, that after the high, you track it, and basically during the backfill section here, the market will do sort of this kind of stuff, and then once it's done, it'll continue doing, or it'll like move on. Now, just a caveat to let you know, so there was for a while a high right here, so this will, and it backfilled, and it may have even finished backfilling or something, but because the expansion never stopped, it pushed up, this got moved to here. It's really important that you understand that this is not like an indicator with a magical turn. It's modeling what is going on in front of you. So if you were tracking this in real time and you watched it go from here and you saw it backfill and that was important to you and you saw it finish, then you could have responded here. And then as it pushed a new high, you would see it again and you say, okay, and you can react. The point is that that's going on. I just want to make that really clear that that's how this indicator works. So look, it finished. You see it marked it. It's all done. So that's backfilling, okay? That's a confusing one. Absolutely ask me about it if it's bothering you, or maybe you want to chat about it or disagree. Okay. The next thing to look at here, because it's probably got your attention, are these little labels here. These happen at expansion. So right here, you see there's no labels, so everything was essentially qualified as normal. And how do I define normal? It's pretty simple, distributions. So I'm using distribution curves to decide what is normal, what is not. So here you have heavy and low. how do I calculate that? Well, it's just take all this volume, compare it to this volume, the total volume at that point. So the whole volume, everything. So it'd be what the volume of the expansion compared to the total. And you're just going to compare these in some way. I use the division to just suggest that I'm comparing them. And then you can see that this was sort of statistically high, or well, it was high. And in this case, the amount of volume in that expansion was quite insignificant with respect to the whole profile. So it tends to be that heavy volume takes longer to deal with, and low volume tends to break back down into the range. Very simple, not a hard rule, just a model. And when you have expansions that don't have any markers, it's just normal. There's three things you can get. You can get a volume signal, which says low volume. So you say something about volume. There's one that talks about time, so it can say something like fast. And then there's expansion. The three. So you tend to see the volume ones the most. We're seeing some expansion, so let me talk about that one. Expansion has to do with volume and price and how directionally there was a move, essentially. And when it shows expansion, it has a tendency to grab wherever it started at, or if there's a nice clear V with a expansion bar retest, which this one actually isn't too bad right there. You see that? It's totally a retest in there. And then you bring that forward, and the expansions tend to expand and then come back to there. If there's no clear target to hit like this, it's just going to grab that one. Now, that's not coded in there. It's just my opinion. So here's an expansion, but that was at the end of the week. So if you're trading there, you're nuts. So let's find another expansion. Here's one. So in this case, there's no like clear V or any, so that's going to be the spot to grab. So let's scroll forward. You can see, I mean, it came back to it, but the idea here is that there's this sort of triangle-ness to it. It took a little while, but it was right about there. So yeah, so that's sort of how the expansions work. They're trying to model that concept. It's not perfect. You'll have to use your other tools to make sure things work out, but there you go. So right down, right back up. Okay, so that's expansion. Then we have speed. So here you see that fast. And that suggests that it moved extremely quickly. And I think you would probably agree with those, that they just moved very quickly to there. So those are the three things, and you'll have to decide what you think about them. You can ask me what I think some other time. I don't really want to get into like strategies and how to actually execute anything, just showing you what is available. The last thing, or not the last thing, excuse me. And here's the values, so you can see that was that one that we clicked on the settings. And then also this 5% limit. Now I want to talk about this for a second because I think it's really important that you understand how this works and what the CME is likely doing here. In looking into this and getting this to function, it seems to me that the CME picks an area that's around 5%, and then they will halt the market or limit the market near that area, not at that area. So in this instance, if I go like this, you see those right there? That was the limit getting hit. It couldn't continue. Now if that wasn't there, maybe price would do something like this, I don't know. But that limit happened, and it was near this, which is the 5%. So this is the actual 5% right there, but it didn't get to it. And I found, looking over other data sets and things, this seems to be about what they do. So there's two things that happen here. You ready? Two. One is the 5% target. Two is the actual trigger. So this was the target, but this is where it triggered. And the way I'm triggering that, it's pretty simple. Just look. I defined this, which is really easy to find mathematically, and it was near this. So simple, right? So that's why it says triggered. because I can see that it hit a limit there and it's near the 5%. That's how that works. It's important that you understand that, because it seems that the CME does not actually use a hard 5% rule. They use a 5% target, and then they limit somewhere near there. Now, on the flip side, we also see times where the market gets through the 5%. Here's one. And that's why it's the target. So it got through that target. What does that mean? I don't know. That's up to you. But there you could see it finally triggered. That's the limit. Hits right there. So you could, I think it's a fair question. Well, what if that wasn't there? What would this look like? I mean, this isn't like crazy price action, right? Maybe it looks like this. I don't know. Maybe it would have looked like that. Beats me. But you can see that's the trigger. This was the target. This actually got through it quite a bit before hitting the triggering the limit. And usually it's pretty close, but that's important that you understand that. This will be spot on. That line will be a general sort of target area, which you should be able to see it if you're looking at the order book or just your DOM. Okay, so I've gotten through a lot of information here and sort of walk through some of the settings here. Expansions, extremes, the auction values, all that kind of stuff. VWAP and some of these settings so that you can get an idea of what types of things this offers. And we didn't cover the gaps. Okay, the gaps, really quick. Most of you are very familiar with gaps, but this has some special caveats here, which is during the Globex session, it will maintain the gap. See that right there? And then once the market opens, it'll drop down that gap cloud down there. So you can see the actual gap. And if it pushed up, it would stop. So I find a good example of that. There's one. So it pushed up and it broke it and then it stopped plotting. Then there's the weekly gaps, which is the gray line you see up here, which shows you where that the gap is for the week. I tend to just note it. I don't usually actually watch the plot, but that's what that is. So this is the weekly gap, and you can see that it did not get hit because it's still plotting. If it gets hit, it'll stop plotting and you won't see it here. So we have our weekly gap right here. Okay, so those are the settings in here, the important settings to look at. There's some other things, hide connections. You can change the Globex CME limit. Maybe at some point they change that. You can alter it. Otherwise, that's the settings and that's the auction profile. If you have questions about it, just feel free to shoot me a message. You can find this at BaconTrading.com. Thanks for showing up. Good luck trading, guys.